I'm dealing with a newborn all by myself. So exercising was like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to do this. So focusing on nutrition is something that I did during that time.
Welcome to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin, owner of Team LoCoFit. Each week, we share the evidence-based practices and communication-driven strategies we use with our clients to help them look, feel, and perform their best. And this episode, I'm really excited to officially announce our newest Team LoCoFit coach, Danielle Aguilar. She'll be joining us today and many podcasts moving forward. Little quick story. So Danielle was my grad school research, I guess, assistant. That was like your unofficial title, right? Basically was in the lab every single day with me when we were running that research. And if you listen to that podcast with me and Campbell, it was probably, I don't know, a month, 2 months ago.
We'll insert it up here.
Okay, yeah, we'll insert it here if you're watching the YouTube video. And we talked about some of like, the fun stuff, and like we'd have to be there like at 4:45. And once, do you remember all the times I've never eaten so many? Like there was this one donut place that we always used to go to. For the first half of my research was actually when I was prepping. So there was definitely no donuts that part, but then the second part of it, so that was so great, but so many awesome memories. And I'm really, really excited for you to be on the team. I've, known you for so long and seen you grow as a coach. So give a little bit of background about yourself before we get into today's topic.
Yeah. So like Laurin said, I met Laurin at the University of South Florida. I was getting my undergrad and she was in her master's program. Dr. Campbell would always like hype her up as like, this was Lane's girl. And I would honestly pass by you in the halls and you were like posing. I'm like, who is this freak like posing in the halls? And then I was like, okay, I got to know you. And you were like a lot more chill. You weren't this freak that I thought you were. And then we kind of
debatable.
We've kind of kicked it off ever since and kind of been in touch over the years. I got my degree in exercise science from USF. My master's study was on refeed days with Dr. Campbell as well. And then I kind of just went off. I was a manager at a restaurant. I had 2 kids. I moved to Texas. And then we recently connected again. I mean, we would like text back and forth a little bit, but then we connected again last winter when I came to Florida. And then you brought me on the team for like podcast stuff, social media stuff. And then now I am a coach with you. So that's kind of a background.
So if you guys have noticed an increase in the quality of the content, that is definitely due to Danielle and her amazing skills. So really excited with all the different things that we're going to be doing, not just with the podcast. We're doing some of like the shorter videos on YouTube and also just changing the way that we operate, like the team Instagram, our own personal Instagrams, just getting better content, also Facebook groups. So you'll be really upset at me if I don't talk about that. So we do have a team Facebook group now that will be open. So we'll put all that information, talk about it more at the end. But what are we talking about today? Postpartum fitness. So as Danielle mentioned, she does have 2 very, very cute kids. They're so adorable. They're usually on our Zoom calls, but not today. So we want to talk about a little bit about postpartum fitness. And this is something that I think, a lot of people either don't know about, and especially if they are new moms or they want to be moms and they just don't know really what to expect. And there's just so much, I think, misinformation in this area. So we wanted to talk about a few different things between just, when you can start training, and breastfeeding and training, and really even just like how to schedule this all in, because obviously being a new mom is going to be very, very different than what your life was previously. So kick it off.
Yeah. So, I guess I'll kind of give a little further background in like my postpartum journey. So I have 2 kids. I have a almost 3-year-old son and then a 1.5-year-old daughter. Now with my son, postpartum fitness was like the least of my priorities. Postpartum was really hard. So like those of you who are out there and you're listening, you're like, exercising is the last thing I want to do. That's okay. Like give yourself grace. I don't want this podcast to come across as like, you need to get back out there and like, this is the steps to take. If you are overwhelmed with being a new mom, working a full-time job, or whatever you have to do, like that's okay. But
Was it more physical for you, or was it because of all the changes, or both?
I think it was, I think both. So I had him, ended up passing out, like hitting my head on the bathroom floor. So I had like a lot of like, okay, like, do I have like a concussion? Is there like internal bleeding? Like I was just like overthinking things. I'm like, I hear buzzing in my ear. So like that went on for like several weeks. And then like my boyfriend was never home because he was a manager at a restaurant. So like I'm dealing with a newborn all by myself. So exercising was like, I don't care. Like I don't want to do this. So focusing on nutrition is something that I did during that time. Now with my second daughter, I felt great. Like we had her, I was going back to walking and like doing normal activities 2 weeks postpartum. So long story short, that's kind of my postpartum journey. And I wanted to start kind of the podcast by saying, typically, if you are a new time mom, like about to have a baby, or if you are thinking about having a baby, the time frame for when you're cleared for exercise is about 4 to 6 weeks postpartum. And you could be thinking like, wow, that's really soon. And it is. Like think of it as like when you had your breast augmentation, are you cleared and ready to exercise 4 weeks after that? Like, no.
I
right?
mean, well, actually, I think it was 6.
Yeah, but like you weren't doing like chest, like upper body stuff. You're cleared to like walk and maybe do some lower body.
Yes.
So that's the same thought process, but a lot of people don't think that way. They're like, okay, cool, doctor cleared me. I, have maybe some diastasis recti, and we'll talk about that. But like otherwise, he said I'm good to go. So I'm going to go back to squatting and deadlifting and doing all those things because the doctor said I was okay. That's not necessarily the case. So why that isn't necessarily the case, and why the doctors, I would hope that they would kind of prod deeper, is because your pelvic floor is going to be weakened and you may have abdominal separation, which is called diastasis recti. There is very simple ways, and the doctors should like test you for that. But after my daughter, they didn't do anything, and it could have been like maybe because of COVID, but I didn't get any like testing done on like if I had abdominal separation or whatnot. So an easy way to test that I guess, first of all, what is that? So it's pretty much the separation and weakening of that linea alba that kind of runs down your abdominal wall. And it starts like pretty much at the sternum. If you're watching on YouTube, then I'm like literally touching myself, and that's why. But it pretty much starts at your sternum and kind of runs down all the way to the pubis bone, and you could feel some like indent, like separation. And it doesn't just happen in postpartum women. It could happen, like you'll see like some bodybuilders, like male bodybuilders especially, they'll have that like separation. I mean, even females will have that like separation. It could happen in like little babies too, but typically they kind of heal on their own. But that is what DR is, and ways to prevent that and ways to kind of make sure that we're healing that is to focus on true diaphragmatic breathing, core exercises, not crunches. But a lot of doctors don't preach that.
And then so they would just say like, oh, go train. And then you might have that and you could really hurt yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, the first doctor I had, he was like, yeah, you need to make sure you're doing a lot of Kegels. Okay, cool. Kegels may help with pelvic floor, but what about my abdominal health? So.
Well, to be fair, I will say the one, a general consensus, I would probably say that most people, when they say you're cleared for exercise, are probably not going back and training super hard right away anyway. You know what I mean? For our population,
yes,
who is a little bit more fitness focused, they might be thinking, oh, I can go right back into that. So I think probably there needs to just be more nuance and, like you said, more questions like, hey, what were you doing, before you got pregnant? What were you doing during your pregnancy? All those types of things, of course, are going to affect it. If somebody was a high level power lifter before they got pregnant and still continued to lift heavy during their pregnancy, well, that's going to be different than somebody who's never worked out before, right? So like there needs to just be a lot more nuance with that conversation, but they probably just say that because most people probably aren't really training that much.
Yeah.
Is what I would imagine. I don't think it's right that they don't explain it more, but I would probably have to think as to why that would happen. That would probably be the case. I don't know.
Yeah. So just like further educating yourself, I guess,
Yes.
you can kind of be in.
It's definitely in your hands. The doctor's probably
Yeah.
not going to give you all of the insights, but
Yeah, like I didn't even know that there was a thing called pelvic floor PTs until like I had my daughter, until I was like researching it on my own. And I was like, wow, like I have some incontinence when I run or when I sneeze. There is definitely some lower back pain. Like Ryan, I tell Ryan all the time when I'm training, I'm like, hey, I can't bench because my back hurts. And he's like, what did you do? I was like, nothing. It's just like always hurts. So if you are listening to this and you have low back pain, like a mom pooch, incontinence, whether like it's when you're squatting or running or whatever, like sneezing, those are all like signs that you have like a weak core. And I would highly suggest reaching out to a pelvic floor PT. And I know I think we're doing a podcast with Taylor. Is that her name?
Taylor Summers. Hopefully this will be our second time we had to schedule it because she got sick the first time. So fingers crossed it goes through, but she is a PT and she's awesome. And I wanted to do a very like deep dive into pelvic floor health because it is something that, I mean, to be honest, I don't know a ton about because it's never been something that's necessarily affected me up until this point. But I know that it's something that does affect a lot of people, not just moms. Like you can have these issues regardless of if you had children or not. But it is a very like under discussed topic, but I think it is growing. I feel like that would just be such an easy thing for like the doctor to be like, hey, like here's a network of people, you know what I mean? Like you're a specialist that would help you in this area, be able to kind of have a working relationship with everybody. But in any case, it is definitely something that you need to know your body. And part of again, our listener base is probably going to be people who are very in tune with that, right? You're going to know when you're pushing yourself too much, too fast, too soon. And I would just say probably there's no reason to push it too fast. Like if you're just going very, very slow into it, that would certainly be better than going too fast. And to Danielle's point in the beginning, like you might not even like want to do anything anyway. You might think if you're pregnant right now, like I can't wait to get back to training and all this stuff, or whatever. But then you're like actually hit with the reality of like, oh my gosh, I have a newborn. Like there's definitely reasons to train and to be physically active for your mental health as well as, of course, your physical health. But that all has to be balanced and prioritized as well.
Yeah. And I had thought of something before you started talking and then I got sidetracked. But so if you do have like, let's say you do go and check if you have diastasis recti and you're like cleared, your doctor says like, hey, you don't have it. They actually like tested you. There are ways where you might still have it during certain movements. So I know for me in particular, I have somewhat healed my DR. I used to have like a 2-inch or 1.5, I would say, gap be running down my midsection. I would say it's like very mild now. If anything, there's like some just like squishiness around the umbilical. But when I do like ab wheel rollouts, if I do a hanging leg raise, I still have some coning. I'm not strong enough for that exercise. And what coning is that like bulging in your like midsection where that linea alba is, you'll kind of like bulge. That is a sign that your core is too weak for that movement. And we definitely need to take steps to kind of progress to that.
Like I have that. So
yeah, so you should probably not do that movement.
No, I don't.
But there's also like sometimes Bulgarian split squats may cause that, or even just cause like pelvic pain. So those are all things, all signs that you're just not ready for those movements, and that's okay. You could build up to that. And also, if you are 5 years, 10 years postpartum and you still have this, don't think that you're a lost cause, because again, this is when I would definitely suggest reaching out to a pelvic floor PT, and they have ways that they could kind of fix this, because muscle is very plastic and it could kind of just like go back together with time.
Definitely get a specialist to put together some program. And even if it is just a PT who knows, a lot about this, right? It doesn't have to just be a pelvic floor specialist, but you definitely want somebody who has experience in this area. But yeah, ab wheels are just like a hard no for me after I got my implants because mine are under the muscle. Basically just that there's certain movements that I just can't do ever since then, because it literally is cut and it just feels like it never really repaired. So I get to the end of an ab rollout and it's just like, no, it's just like, and we're falling. But so how about breastfeeding and training? So this is something that a lot of clients are, of course, going to be doing and definitely curious about, because we all know if you are breastfeeding, milk supply is incredibly important, and not interrupting that supply is really what's most important. And training too hard or having calories too low, just in general, whether that's the calories are too low from not eating enough and or from overtraining, that is certainly going to cause some milk supply issues.
Yeah. So what I typically have clients do is I will have them start either, hey, do you want to start like with a deficit, or do we want to start training and then keep kind of food high? Because I definitely don't want to, hey, let's start a diet and let's add in training at the same time. Because once that milk supply drops, yes, you can get it back, but it's harder, I would say. So I'd rather just keep that elevated. And there are going to be times where it just naturally falls because your baby gets older. But making sure that we are prioritizing hydration, because a lot of the time too, it can just be like, hey, you added in training and now you're not drinking as much as, or like you're now sweating more and you're not kind of rehydrating. So making sure that we are getting in 128, maybe more ounces of water a day. You should be getting that even if you weren't training and breastfeeding, just because of how
Cough, cough, clients.
just with how important fluid hydration is. And then making sure that we are having, there's like so many like things on Pinterest about like foods that are great for like breast milk. So, is that really true? But oats
If
are
it's on
great.
Pinterest, probably not, but
They say oatmeal is great, flaxseed, chia seeds. I feel like that's all just like high calorie stuff. So it's just making sure that you're
and like
getting
quality
in,
fats.
yeah, wholesome nutrient food, quality fats. You know, not saying that you can't have an occasional ice cream cone here and there, but definitely making sure that we are prioritizing our nutrition, especially if we are adding in training. And I just remembered what I was going to say. I had a client reach out to me recently saying, hey, she's due in about 4 weeks. She wants to start, like she's ready to go the moment she has a baby. And that's great. She has 3 kids, and that could totally be the case. But also knowing that it's okay to not start right away. If you want to kind of sign up with a coach and kind of maybe have the accountability or someone to talk to, or kind of nutrition guidance and stuff like that, then that's something I would recommend. But I never really want to say, hey, you just had a baby, let's put you on a diet like 3 days postpartum and let's start training, or let's start walking and then training or something along those lines.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of postpartum moms, and I would say that's really good advice as far as, of course, definitely if somebody is breastfeeding or not is going to be really important, right? Because if somebody isn't breastfeeding, based on, of course, they don't need to keep their milk supply. So if they are losing, weight, it's definitely not as much of a concern. But I would say shifting that mindset away from, I just had a baby, I need to immediately get back into this. Now, like you said, the client specifically that you're talking about, she already has 3 kids. This will be her 4th kid. She's probably like, I'm so done with having kids. I just want to focus on my body again, et cetera, et cetera. And that is very understandable. However, I think it is important to be able to shift that mindset to say, okay, I want to have goals for myself. I want to be accountable. I want to get back on some type of program, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a calorie deficit right away. And instead, what we can say is, hey, why don't we just get back to, tracking protein and making sure we're having enough water and getting some movement in, like that can be a really great place to start. Instead of saying like, all right, you just had your kid, let's start dieting, let's get back to training 5 days a week. It might be better to say, let's spend this first month working on these habits. Now, maybe that person is super dialed in. They've been dialed in their whole pregnancy, and that's definitely something that is a possibility. So they're like, no, I'm ready to go. It's still important to be able to have that flexibility during the program, because you really don't know what's going to happen that first month. And I would say, again, it's definitely a little bit different for her because this is her fourth kid. So she's kind of like, I know what's going on. But new moms, it might be a little bit more overwhelming to do this. And like you opened up with, Danielle, and you said like, hey, don't feel bad, if you're not doing this right away, but you still can take certain steps. And I think that it goes back to, we talked about this a little bit on the body image podcast, but it's like, why are you doing something, right? Are you hiring a coach because you hate your body and you want to lose weight right away? Or are you hiring a coach because you want accountability and you want to establish like better habits and be able to maintain function in all areas of your life? That's a way better second situation than the first one. And that takes away that kind of pressure of like, I need to have my bounce back body like that. Which, not saying you can't have physique goals after you have kids. Like, we clearly fully support that. But you also have to be realistic with what that means for the rest of your life, like the other areas of your life. And hey, what's this first month or two really going to look like versus, down the line?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think you already like talked about the body image podcast, and we'll put it up here, but I think it's important, especially in the fitness industry, those of you who are listening, who are like physique athletes, who are kind of like stepping into motherhood. It could be hard having, like, let's say, a social media following that knows you as a bikini competitor. You feel that pressure that, okay, hey, people are saying you'll never get your body back because there's so many like internet trolls that just like want to see you fail. So you almost feel like, hey, I need to do this to prove them wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, again, it's great to have a goal. It's great to get back to or beat that baby body. But why does this internet troll like dictate how you're going to approach that postpartum journey? If you are not ready to start, then don't start. Don't feel like you have to because they're telling you that you do,
For sure. It always goes back to the like, why are you doing something? And you're able to do two things at once. You're able to recognize the new challenges and the different things that are going to be in your life with being a new mom. And you're also able to say, I have goals for myself and I want to work towards things, but I need to be maybe more realistic with my time, my schedule, what I can be doing, and why. Again, going back to why are you doing this? Is this for an intrinsic reason, or is it a little bit more external? And then that kind of goes into our like whole, we want to talk about just how to fit in training, right? How to fit in this stuff, because it is very overwhelming. And again, I can't speak to this because I'm not a mom, but I work with a lot of moms. I know a lot of moms, and your life changes a lot, is the understatement of the year, when you have kids. And you can no longer say, these are the exact days that I want it. Like, you just don't have the luxury of saying and doing things how you used to, or it's really not about scheduling it. It's less about like just on the fly stuff. You can't just be like, oh, I want to go do this right now. Like, that's just not a possibility. You have to schedule things. Otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And kind of what I used to do is I would wake up early. So I definitely encourage, if you have a full-time job, or if like the kids clubs aren't open, or if you don't have a gym membership, waking up early and doing either like a downstairs garage workout, going to the apartment gym while they're still sleeping, and like bringing the baby monitor with you is definitely what I would encourage for those who, again, don't have access to that. But if you do, and I know you may think this sounds crazy, but sometimes people actually feel bad putting their kids in a daycare, like in a kids club.
Why would I of course I know that.
Oh, okay. Well then cool. But I have a lot of clients who are like, hey, like I just like feel really bad leaving them there for an hour, and I feel like it's selfish and like all of those things. But does this hour make you a better mom at the end of the day? does it make you have more patience with your kids if they are throwing a fit? And if it does, then I would say that it's more selfish for you not to do that, because you end up becoming like this monster of a parent. And that's like a really bad word to use, but you end up becoming, not as good of a parent, or not as good as a mom, if you were to just take some time for yourself and do, even if it was like you put them in there for 30 minutes and you did like a little walk because you just needed a break. Like, parenting is stressful. So again, if that makes you a better parent, do it.
Yeah, I totally understand how that would feel really, really like you would feel very guilty. I understand how that would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad parent. I should be with my kids 24/7, doing everything with them, for them, etc. But at some point, you also have to be able to do things for yourself. Understandably, though, just say you were somebody who trained 6 days a week for 2 hours before you had a kid. That's probably not going to happen, right? Realistically speaking, that might not be the reality for you. It might be in a year or 2 or 3 or 5, but especially a new mom, like postpartum fitness for this podcast, like that's probably not going to happen, right? Nor are you really going to want to do that. So I would say that it's always a balance of, okay, you can still have goals for yourself, especially when it comes to fitness. They just might need to be altered. And we did another podcast reference.
You're like linking so many podcasts.
Linking all these podcasts, which I don't know how you do that, but it's all on YouTube if you guys want to see it. But we did answer
for watching YouTube videos. Like, that's the con, or that's a pro to watching YouTube.
There we go. There's the pro. And you get to see our beautiful faces. But it was a question that was sent in, and basically it was somebody who was like, I know what to do in order to like feel better as far as like food and training and all this, but I can't make myself a priority, and I put everybody above myself. And she specifically was talking about, with the kids, I don't want that, I have to go home and I have to make dinner, and then, I've picked them up, and always like, I have to do this. And it's like, in there, she talks about like, she has a husband and she has a family and she has all this stuff. And it's like, well, not saying you need to like dump the kids on them all the time, you know what I mean? But there is a time where you can say, hey, can we coordinate to like, maybe if you pick up the kids this day, I can go and train 3 days a week. Or, hey, I'm going to cook dinner tonight, but then the next day, could you do this? And, it's more about like that kind of partnership. Of course, that gets a little bit different for single parents, understandably. But there are other options, with stuff like the gym daycares and etc. So there's a lot of options. And I think that it's about balancing, your goals for not just, again, physical health, but for your mental health. Like, that's really important to have something that you can have time, like Danielle said, whether it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes up to an hour, but just also being realistic with what that looks like. Maybe now it's just 3 days a week, and then the other time it's like you're taking, you have one of the fancy strollers, and you can go for walks with your kids. Obviously,
it doesn't even need to be a fancy stroller.
Okay, whatever. I don't know. I feel like all strollers look fancy to me. I'm like, damn, these things are like serious when I see.
They're like $1,000, those fancy ones. Like,
oh my god. What?
Like, that family like has money when you see them like with the double, like, I don't even know what the brand is, but they're like really nice. But you're like, damn, like you just dropped over 1,000. I can't talk.
I guess I don't mean maybe. I just mean I'm sure there are better strollers for walking for 30 minutes versus like down the street, but maybe not. I don't know. Clearly, I'm talking out of my ass, but there has to be a not $1,000 option. But
oh yeah,
like, hey, let's go for a walk. Clearly, again, not when the kid is just born and it's like fucking 20 degrees outside, but relatively speaking, there are ways that you can make this work where you still are able to do something for yourself that you enjoy, and it makes you feel good, but it's also, relatively speaking, within the constraints of your new life.
That's exactly like with my son, I would do some walking. And another thing that you have to keep in mind, if you are a new mom and you are listening, walking with a newborn can actually like overstimulate them and like kind of make it worse. I didn't know that. I went on like a 30-minute walk with my son when he was like a few weeks old, and like I could not get him to bed like the rest of the night. Man, that was traumatizing. I remember it to this day. So maybe like don't go out on like a really long walk on like a bumpy sidewalk.
Yeah,
But once they're older, definitely try to get outside. It's great for them too, like vitamin D and just like fresh air. So yeah, walking is definitely a good one. And then I mean, even if you don't have time for training, walking and like proper nutrition is enough for you to get back to that pre-baby body. Like you don't need to be fucking killing yourself in the gym like for 2 hours to get back to that body.
100%. And there's always a time for that. And, you know, it's always going back to that kind of having some goals, but keeping them moderate to like what actually makes sense for your life. Because if you just say, I don't want to do, you know, if like you said, you didn't want to train at all, but you were pretty on top of your diet, right?
Yeah,
So that was
I was a manager at a restaurant at the time. I was like coaching on the side and a manager, so I was active there. And
very
then
active.
yeah.
So I think it's important to still, you know, you still want to do things that are making you feel good, right? You know, you want to get back to some activity levels, you want to eat well, you maybe get back into the gym, but it's just going to be through a little bit of a different lens right away. I guess to end it, what was like the most surprising thing about postpartum fitness for you, or just kind of in general? I guess like the stroller story, but like what was like one of the most surprising things that you just didn't expect?
Um, Probably the pain of like just normal Bulgarian split squats, like not like pain, like muscular pain,
Yeah,
but like pelvic.
man, that's like an interesting one, but I can see, you know.
Yeah. And it took a while for that to kind of go away. And again, I felt so good after Mila that I was just like, I'm going to do jump squats and like, I'm going to do like everything after 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, like squatting hurts, lunges hurt, like everything just hurts. And I didn't even try that with Valentino. So I was like, I didn't expect that. So definitely like the pelvic pain, is definitely something that I did not expect.
Yeah, and I definitely would not have expected, I wouldn't have pegged Bulgarian split squats as one of those things.
Yeah.
But hey, the more you know, right? That's what's important. So anything else you want to add before we finish out?
No, I think that's it. I think we covered everything
All
that I
right.
had.
Yeah, any other questions you guys have, of course, you can send them in. We have a link below in the show notes. And like we talked about a little bit in the beginning, we did start a Facebook group that is going to be very interactive. We're very excited about this. I'm going to pretend to be excited. I have always just not liked Facebook, but I see the value in it. And
The
Danielle,
community.
a
People love
community.
community.
No, I think it's gonna be really great. I'm removing my dark lens of a bias and saying, okay, this is gonna be a really good thing.
Your
So
black shirt with black nails.
of course, and this is off black. Okay, it's called, I know you can,
Lincoln Park After Dark.
either do that color or just black. There's like no in between for me. I love how you knew what that was. Stop. So yeah, we'll put that link below as well. Definitely check out the YouTube channel. That's where you can see all of the links. And we'll also put those short videos up there for you guys as well. And lastly, of course, if you want to apply for coaching or send us an email, you can visit teamlocofit.com. So thank you guys as always for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.